Okay, looks like we're all set. A very good afternoon and welcome to the Rural Press Club of Victoria's webinar with Agriculture and Regional Development Minister Mary-Ann Thomas. I'm Bryce Eishold, the Vice President of the club, and we extend our thanks to the Minister who has allowed the time today to address the club. This webinar, like many others over the last 2 years during COVID-19, is part of the club's charter to provide online, in-person and networking opportunities for rural and regional journalists and photographers working in Victoria. On a side note, before we get started, the club is planning to hold its annual Photography and Journalism Awards night on August 27, and the club's committee will meet this week to decide whether the event will go ahead online, in person, or be rescheduled to a later date. So our members will be advised of that decision. The club received more than 180 entries for the awards this year, and that is a remarkable effort given the challenging circumstances regional and rural media has faced over the last 12 months. As for today's event, the Minister will have the opportunity to address the club for about 20 minutes. And after that, club committee member and journalist Simone Smith will host a Q&A session, which will last for about 30 minutes. Working journalists will be given the priority to ask questions. The remaining time will be allocated to those from outside the media industry who are joining us today. And just a friendly note, we can't always get to all the questions that are asked in these forums. Questions can be asked through the Q&A function, and a reminder to be brief with your question. Include your name and the publication or business you are representing. More than 190 people have registered for today's event, and people are still joining, and the webinar will finish around 1 p.m. today. As for our guest speaker, Mary-Ann Thomas was first elected to the Victorian Parliament as the Labor member for Macedon in 2014. Prior to this, Ms Thomas worked across public, private and community sectors, including as the Communications Executive for the Department of Premier and Cabinet, the NAB and Plan International. Ms Thomas was appointed to the Minister for Agriculture and Minister for Regional Development in 2020 in December, having previously served as the Cabinet Secretary between 2016 and 20, as well as the Parliamentary Secretary for Health for more than 2 years from 2014 to 2016. Without any further ado, it gives me great pleasure on behalf of the Rural Press Club of Victoria to welcome Victorian Agriculture Minister and Minister for Regional Development, Mary-Ann Thomas, to today's virtual podium. Thanks, Mary-Ann.
Thank you. Thank you and good afternoon, everyone. It really is a great pleasure to join with you this afternoon. I wish that I had the opportunity to do it in person, but alas, that is not the case. However, in breaking news, as I'm sure you've all heard, for those of us that do live in rural and regional Victoria, there will be a significant change to our restrictions, with most of them being lifted tonight. So that's great news, and I certainly hope as a consequence of that to do what I love most about my job, and that is to get out and about across rural and regional Victoria to meet with people on the ground, hear their stories and understand the challenges that they are facing. May I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we are all gathered. I'm joining you today from Wurundjeri country, and so I pay my respects to their elders past and present. I would also like to acknowledge any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be joining us here today. Thank you very much, as I said, to the Rural Press Club. I want to start by recognising the vital role that you play in telling the stories that matter to rural and regional Victorians. It's always been a thriving sector, but I do want to acknowledge the changing media landscape. And can I say that that's of great concern to regional and rural Victorians. And I do want to take time to acknowledge those who have lost their jobs over the last months and last couple of years, really, from the Nine Network, the Leader Group, and other media outlets that have closed over the last few years. So it has been a really challenging time for rural and regional media, but we want to stand with you. The Victorian government really wants to do what we can to support rural and regional Victoria, the media, and we do that, of course, by investing a 15% of our advertising spend, and we have made some other significant contributions again to advertising to help support the outlets for which you write and present. Now, since being appointed as Minister for Regional Development and Agriculture last December, I have been working hard to get to all corners of our state, meeting with farmers, workers, business owners, traditional owners, councils and local leaders. And my message is a simple one. The Andrews Labor government is committed to a thriving future for rural and regional Victoria. And while commodity prices have been high, it's also true to say that the last few years have been tough. A global COVID pandemic, drought, devastating bushfires, avian influenza. These are just some of the challenges that you have faced. But with these challenges comes opportunity, and the Andrews Labor government is focused on ensuring that we are doing what we can to harness these opportunities and work side by side with you in rural and regional Victoria. Our government has invested more than $30 billion into rural and regional Victoria since coming into office in 2014. And this investment has helped to create thousands of jobs, grow local industries and businesses, and invest in hundreds of projects that matter to Victorian communities. Regional Victoria is home to more than 1.5 million Victorians, almost a quarter of our state, and contributes more than $80 billion to the state's economy every year. That's about a fifth of Victoria's economic value, and a significant part of this is due to our agriculture sector. Our farmers, agribusinesses and surrounding communities are an integral part of our way of life and a cornerstone of our economy. And I'm proud to be leading our government's transformative 10-year strategy for our agriculture sector. This is a strategy that we have backed in with $115 million of investment. Thinking about my key priorities as Minister, it's pretty clear to me that supporting a sustainable agriculture sector is right up there, number one, as in my role as Agriculture Minister. I'm also very focused on creating jobs and opportunities for rural and regional Victorians, and actively working to address workforce shortages that are being experienced in the regions. If I can take the time to share with you, I will talk through some of the actions that we're taking across those priorities. But firstly, I'd like to start off with an announcement. As you may know, or well, I'm sure you do know, Victoria is the dairy capital of Australia, accounting for 77% of Australia's dairy exports, valued at $2.1 billion. In 2016, the Victorian government partnered with Dairy Australia and the Gardner Foundation to launch the Dairy Bio Initiative, an innovation program dedicated to ensuring a profitable and sustainable future for dairy farmers. As a result of climate change and other regulatory and trade changes, Dairy Australia has estimated that dairy farmers will need to increase productivity by 1.5% per year to maintain profitability. I'm proud to announce today the launch of Dairy Bio 21, a 5-year, $55 million investment into bioscience to support Australia's dairy sector. This builds on our $60 million investment from 2016 to deliver this research program over the past 5 years. The initial Dairy Bio research program uncovered the key genetic traits our farmers need to target to ensure that their cows produce fewer methane emissions. With the ongoing support of Dairy Australia and the Gardner Foundation, it will ensure farmers have the tools and information they need to implement the findings of this research on farm. The long-term vision of this investment is to provide tangible benefits for farmers so that they can raise cows that produce more milk, healthier calves with fewer emissions, securing a sustainable future for our dairy sector. Of course, this work aligns strongly with our government's leadership in climate change and will facilitate world-leading research and innovation to ensure an even brighter future for our dairy industry here in Victoria. This announcement today, of course, builds on our existing work surrounding sustainable agriculture. In May, our government unveiled our ambitious climate change strategy and our interim emissions targets. This strategy will keep Victoria on track to meet our target of net zero emissions by 2050, while also seizing the opportunities of climate change, advancing technology, investing in new industry, and creating jobs for Victorians. Farmers are at the front line when it comes to experiencing the impacts of climate change, and I know that they are ready to be at the forefront when it comes to tackling the challenges. Indeed, many are already doing so. I'm excited to work with our farmers, industry bodies, and our Victorian Agriculture Climate Change Council to shape and deliver our $20 million investment in emissions reduction activities through the Agriculture Sector Pledge, positioning Victoria as a leader in taking action on climate change. And I might say in what some other states and indeed the Commonwealth see as the too hard basket, which of course is agriculture. Further to this, we are investing $3.9 million to deliver groundbreaking Victorian research into agriculture emissions reduction technologies and practices, including trials to test two promising methane inhibiting feed additives for use on the types of pasture-based grazing systems that are most common on Victorian farms. We know that international markets are looking for a point of difference in products, and our premium offerings will be attractive to international markets, ensuring our farmers are not only competitive, but world-leading. And you know what? This can be done. A few months ago, I met Mark Wooten of Jigsaw Farms in Western Victoria. He sells carbon neutral wool into the Italian market for a premium, highlighting the value that low emissions credentials can bring to accessing export markets. While the EU carbon tax is a stark reminder and a warning for Australia, if we don't cut emissions, we will lose exports. While we are taking action to deliver for the Victorian agriculture sector, I know that more needs to be done across state and territory boundaries. And as I've already alluded to, as in my time as Agriculture Minister, I've only attended one Ag Ministers meeting, the only one that's been called. And it is disappointing for me and for other agriculture ministers to see the stance that is being taken by the Federal National Party when it comes to agriculture and climate change. We must embrace the opportunities that taking real action on climate change will provide to the industry. And as I've said previously, in my experience in working on the ground with farmers, farmers are more than ready to come on board and be part of this journey. I want to now talk about creating jobs and opportunities in rural and regional Victoria. Our regional partnerships, which were established back in 2016, are our trusted advisors. These comprise community leaders across rural and regional Victoria, people who've got their ears and their eyes on the ground and are helping us to shape bright new futures for rural and regional Victorians right across our state. So if there are members of the partnerships online today, I want to extend my gratitude for all the work that you do and the exciting ideas that you bring to government. Across Victoria, we see regions undergoing transition. Of course, we all know about the Latrobe Valley and the challenges that it faces, where it has for many, many decades been reliant on a single industry. That's no longer an option, and it's no longer an option wherever you live. But our government established the Latrobe Valley Authority back in 2016 to support the transition of the valley's workers, their families, and the community at the time of the Hazelwood Power Station and mine closure. And since then, we've helped add more than 3,000 new jobs to the region's workforce, and we will continue to invest in this community. This year's budget provided $10 million for the Latrobe Valley Food Manufacturing Precinct in Morwell, and that will enable that precinct to get or access water and energy that is needed to continue to attract businesses to the precinct and create more jobs. But we're seeing some of the challenges that the Latrobe Valley has faced potentially roll out in other parts of our state. And so we are working proactively across Victoria. And I'm pleased to say also that our budget announced $17.4 million to assist Portland in the southwest of the state with the Portland Economic Diversification Plan. This, of course, Portland is, as you will know, a beautiful part of Victoria, but has long relied on the Alcoa aluminium smelter for jobs in that community. We need to be prepared for whatever the future may bring, and that's what our $17.4 million investment is all about. And I might add that this responds directly to a diversification plan that has been developed on the ground by the Glenelg Shire and working in partnership with our regional partnership. This plan includes upgrades to key local freight roads, funding for crucial foundation infrastructure to help attract new businesses, and a fund for local projects to grow the economy. So regardless of where we are in Victoria, our rural and regional communities have their own character, their own aspirations, and their own understanding of their challenges and opportunities. From Mildura to Mallacoota, Wodonga to Warrnambool, Hamilton to Horsham, regional communities are known for their unique strength, their determination, and their can-do attitude. And it really is what the government wants to harness. So we are there to work side by side with communities and to help regional towns, rural towns realise their vision for their future. So regional development is really about connecting on the ground with the people that know their communities best. And my department works, as I said, to help fulfil the aspirations of those communities. Now, just to give you some examples of some of the things that we have been able to achieve and that I've had the pleasure of visiting, or some of the projects that I've had the pleasure of attending or visiting, let me talk to you a little bit about what's been happening in Gippsland. So, of course, we know that Gippsland has endured several challenges in recent years, first with years of drought, followed by the devastating bushfires, and then the impact of the pandemic on the visitor economy, which has been or had been growing from strength to strength. And of course, now is dealing with the aftermath of the recent storm and flooding events. However, this is not stopping this resilient community from working hard to come up with new ideas and get them to the development stage. So one of the projects that I had the pleasure of visiting was the Meetung Hot Springs development. Now, this is a really exciting tourism development, which will deliver Australia's first hot springs golf course, complete with a glamping village. It's going to transform tourism in this area. We anticipate this will generate up to 10 new permanent jobs in its first year and a further 10 during construction, and with later stages creating further employment and training opportunities. Now, what's happening in Meetung is we've got the private sector investing a huge amount of money, supported by the Victorian government, to create a very high-end tourism experience. What we know is that the we want to do all we can to attract those higher yield visitors, and we can create really great jobs in the tourism and hospitality sector. Great jobs that have great careers and opportunities for young people to work where they live, and that's really at the heart of so much of what we're trying to achieve. Of course, I was recently in Tongala to announce our government's support for the Greenham & Sons $50 million investment to upgrade and modernise their meat processing facility. This is a huge announcement for the region and will create up to an additional 230 jobs for the community. I'm sure many of you know Greenhams, they're family run and owned, but their processing plant in Tongala had been experiencing some challenges as the region's dairy cows were reducing in number. So what Peter Greenham and his team had determined to do was to make an investment to grow the processing of premium beef. And the Victorian government, I'm proud to say, was there to help. What's happening in Tongala is emblematic of what we are supporting elsewhere, value adding to what we grow and produce to maximise economic opportunities. Well, not far away in Gagare, another transformational project is coming to fruition. Again, many of you may know this, this small community that was devastated many years ago when it lost its food processing facility, and that the town at that time had an option, or had options. They could either accept that employment growth was never going to be something that they could continue to aspire to, or they could create a new vision for their town. And I really want to congratulate this community for their vision, because it's a huge and aspirational vision, and again, a project that the Victorian government has been really proud to partner with the community on, and that is their aspiration to build a botanic garden in Gagare. I've seen the artists' impressions. The landscape architects that are working with the community on this project are top-notch, and this small town of 500 people will be a home to an absolute destination. The botanic gardens are going to be really beautiful. We're investing 1.5 million, and it will create a jewel in the crown of the Campaspe region and give visitors from right across Australia, internationally, when they're allowed to come, a reason to visit this small community. But garden tourism is huge, and I just know that this will be the real the real fillip that this community needs. So I look forward to watching that project progress. Now, I've also talked about the work that I'm doing and the commitment that I have to addressing workforce challenges. And if I might start by talking about horticulture first. Since my appointment, and many of you will know, I was on the phone to a number of you within days of being appointed, talking about the workforce shortages that were being faced in our horticulture industry. And so I have been focused on supporting the industry, get the workforce it needs. And our government has worked to provide support on a scale that has never been seen before when it comes to the government support for the private sector. We have provided a comprehensive $76 million program to attract local workers, support businesses and communities, and secure an international workforce. In June, we announced an extension to some of our most effective programs, including the seasonal harvest sign-on bonus, which has seen more than 2,800 workers receive their first 810 instalment for completing 10 days work, and more than 1,500 have completed the required 40 days to receive the full bonus. This program is all about building a local workforce. And the really good news, nearly 30% of the people that have participated in our sign-on bonus program are working in agriculture for the first time, and more than 95% said they plan to continue to work in a seasonal harvest, which is a great result. We have also announced an extension to our quarantine arrangement with the Tasmanian government. So far, nearly 1,000 Pacific workers have arrived, bringing their skills and expertise to support farmers from East Gippsland to the Sunraysia, with an additional 160 workers arriving last week to begin their 14 days quarantine. Earlier this year, I was at Sue and David Finger's apple orchard at Launching Place in the Yarra Valley, and it was great to meet a few of the Pacific Islanders while I was there. It was very humbling to meet Caltac, who was from Vanuatu. He had left his family to come and earn money fruit picking. And he told me that 1 week of fruit picking in Victoria is the equivalent to a month's salary back home. So he will be using this money to support his family and his children and help give them the life that they deserve. So we know that our Pacific Islander workers are absolutely critical for our peak harvest work, and we are working to find a safe pathway for more of these workers to return. I note that the Commonwealth's announced on the weekend that they're ready to double the number of workers allowed into Australia as part of the Pacific Island workforce schemes. Look, this is good news, but without support for quarantine, it will be really challenging for state governments to implement. And again, I look forward to working with my federal counterpart in a cooperative way to face into this national challenge that we face as a consequence of the coronavirus. But I have been pleased to, here in Victoria to facilitate connections between industry groups, the supermarkets, growers and unions, to think outside the square and consider the work that needs to be done in order to attract a local workforce. So we need to be thinking in ways in which we can build the reputation of horticulture, how we can create better opportunities for workers in horticulture, including career pathways, and how and where to invest in labour-saving technologies. I've said it before and I'll say it again, that I'm not prepared to concede that we cannot generate a local workforce. This is a workforce that will be supplemented by our Pacific Island neighbours. But I need to say this, it is going to be a very long time, I expect, before backpackers are able to return to Australia. And I would also say that there are other competing economic cohorts out there. Of course, as you're all very well aware, Victoria has a high reliance on international students. So the universities are clamouring to bring international students back into Victoria. The hospitality industry is experiencing shortages and so on. So it's bringing those international workers in is going to remain challenging. But it's not just our seasonal workforce that I'm focused on. Our rural and regional communities are finding it more difficult than ever to find the workforce they need to undertake the jobs that need to be filled. And as great as it is to see so many people realising what we all know, that regional and rural Victoria has some of the best places to live in the world, intrastate migration and to some extent tourism has created, or in some instances exacerbated, housing supply issues. It is clear to me from my recent trips around the state that rental properties and homes for sale are in desperate short supply in many LGAs. I've heard directly from local businesses and stakeholders about the difficulties faced in recruiting and retaining workers due to a shortage of housing. And as Minister for Regional Development, I want to let you know that I'm keenly alive to this problem. The Andrews Labor government, as I'm sure you're aware, is making significant investments to boost housing supply, including through our $5.3 billion investment in social and affordable housing through the Big Housing Build. And this project includes a minimum 25% spend in rural and regional Victoria. But I'm also pleased to be able to talk to you today about a smaller but complementary project and an announcement that I made just last month. We are investing $5 million in new regional workforce pilots to test solutions to some of these workforce challenges in 4 regional locations. The pilots are being undertaken in the Grampians with a focus on Ararat, in the Great South Coast, the Alpine Shire and in Robin Vale. So what we are doing across these regions is working in partnership with local industry groups, with employment agencies and providers, with our regional partnerships in the Alpine Shire, with Tourism Northeast, and we are tackling the issues that have been identified. Now, these include the lack of housing, as I said, so we are supporting unlocking of land, enabling infrastructure. In other areas, and I'm sure this is a problem known to some of you, the increasing profitability of the tourism sector has meant that a number of houses have been taken off the market for tourism. We need to work with the owners of some of those properties to understand how we can best maximise their return on their investment, but how we can utilise underutilised properties for key workers. So we've got a range of pieces of work underway in those 4 areas, and we are working, as I said before, across government. The Transport Department is also working with us. So I look forward to having more to say to you about these projects as they progress. Look, thank you so much for taking the time today to meet with me, or to invite me to be part of your Rural Press Club luncheon today. I hope that I've been able to, I might say luncheon without the lunch, but that's okay. I hope that I've been able to illustrate to you today our government's absolute commitment to really growing rural and regional Victoria and ensuring that rural and regional Victorians can access everything that is great about our state, and that they have opportunities, particularly for young people, to pursue opportunities in place. Of course, a number of you know that I grew up in the northeast of Victoria, and back in the day, the only way to pursue the options that I wanted to pursue was to hop on the first train out of town after my HSC, as it was back then, and that's what I did, and it took me quite a long time to return to regional Victoria. We want to work to ensure that young people can see a future for themselves in rural and regional Victoria. This is really important, particularly for our ag sector, which of course we need to be boosting and supporting young people on farms. But I've got so many stories to share. I won't do it today, but I know that with again, to the journalists that are on board, I love the opportunity to get out and meet with you and tell you about some of the projects that the government is supporting and that are really important across rural and regional Victoria. There's no doubt about it, the pandemic has been really tough. It's really, as we've faced into something that we've never dealt with before. And of course, this comes on the back of other more familiar disasters like drought and fire and floods. But I am full of confidence for the people of rural and regional Victoria that we will continue to grow, thrive and prosper, and that rural and regional Victoria will remain a great place to live, work and invest. Thanks very much for the opportunity. I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. I really appreciate your time. I'm Simone Smith. I'm a Rural Press Club of Victoria committee member. Thank you for your speech. Also, there's some exclusive news in there for the dairy industry, which
yes,
pricked my interest. That's my cup of tea.
Excellent.
But look, we'll start off here. You did mention, weather disasters, that sort of stuff. We've got a question here from Peter from ABC Gippsland. He says, Gippsland farmers were without electricity for up to 14 days after the June storms. If these weather events are to become more common, how will you help farmers adapt? Their businesses have been set up to cope with short power outages, but not long ones.
Thanks, Peter. I think that is a really great question, and it goes back to some of the comments I made about the need for our federal government to take seriously the impacts of climate change. We need to look at these events and understand that they are likely to occur more frequently. And the question that you raised is an excellent one. This was the first disaster, and it was experienced also, I might say, in my own electorate, where we were also without mobile communications. And what I learned on the ground was that for many people, this was the most difficult thing to come to grips with. and indeed around the Trentham and Hepburn regions, you may know that people were essentially trapped in their homes without power and without communication. So we have to learn the lessons of this recent disaster. And Peter, I know that many farmers, of course, have generators to back them up, and they're well prepared. But as you say, we saw the power down for an unprecedented amount of time. The number of trees down across our state is just kind of astounding. But it's certainly something that the government will be looking into, and I thank you for the question. I don't have the answer for you here and now, as I'm sure you would expect, but again, I will reiterate how important it is that we work with the Commonwealth and keep the pressure on the Commonwealth to take the threat of climate change seriously, because it's people in rural and regional Australia who are experiencing its impacts directly.
Thanks, Minister. We've got a question here from Grace at Win News in Bendigo. She's asking about the government's changes to assessing Crown land for camping and recreational purposes.
Yes.
She says the government has said they will issue fines greater than $1,500 to those doing the wrong thing, for example, leaving rubbish or taking dogs off leads. How does the government plan to monitor this?
So the way in which we will be monitoring it is that the VF Fish 24-hour phone number is accessible. So anyone that has a concern about the behaviour or any issues with campers can call that number, which will enable access to authorised officers. But of course, the police can always be called at any time as well. It's really important to note when it comes to Crown River frontages and camping on Crown River frontages that Crown River frontages have always been accessible to the public. The thing that's changing here is that ability to camp overnight. And this was an election commitment. We made it before the 2018 election. And we introduced legislation into the House that was supported by all parties. It went through the House, and now working with the regulations to deliver this commitment. I've been very pleased to work closely with a range of stakeholders. I've talked regularly to the VFF about this. I've met farmers on the ground, and I'm sure that, well, I know that our announcement on Friday was very well received, and I'm sure that when we announce the areas on which camping can take place and the regulations that will go with it, that also will be well received.
Well, Minister, there's actually been a follow-up question from Grace, and she says that farmers have to sign national vendor declaration forms for their biosecurity purposes with their livestock. But she wants to know how farmers can ensure their cattle haven't consumed contaminants if farmers are not aware of who's accessing their Crown land where perhaps their stock might graze.
Well, the advice that I have received from AgVic is that camping, like, let's go back and remember that people have always been allowed to access this land, and that any threats to biosecurity are very minimal, extremely minimal. So I think that, again, we'll go back to, if farmers have concerns about the behaviour of people camping on Crown land, then they need to raise those with the authorities. Let's be clear, it is illegal to trespass on private property. And so campers will not be allowed on farms. They will be on the Crown land river frontages, but they will be expected to behave appropriately, and the regulations will outline that.
We've got a question here from Natalie from the Weekly Times. She says the harvest sign-on bonus has proved successful, but is it sustainable as a long-term to attract Australian workers to the industry? And she's followed on by saying, what other measures are you looking at introducing to bring in more local workers?
Oh, well, look, thanks to Natalie for that. That's a great question. And look, I'd have to say the answer to that is no. Like, the government can't continue to supplement wages of a particular cohort of workers. But I think what the sign-on bonus has demonstrated is that there is a sweet spot there when it comes to pay, where people will take up this work. Was very pleased to be able to facilitate the coming together, as I said in my talk, of growers and industry groups, supermarkets and so on. I know that right now more work is continuing on strategies that have got to be led by the industry, strategies that are led by the industry to attract a local workforce. So here's an example that I have have posited to the industry. This is an industry that's relied on international backpackers. International backpackers are not coming back anytime soon. Meanwhile, Victorian kids can't go backpacking. How can we think perhaps about a backpacking experience for young people? The other thing to think about for our own young people, work really, really hard during the day, but there's got to be some fun in the evenings, right? What can we do about, or how can industry come better together to create a 12-month experience so that there is more continuity? Because you think about what we're asking people to do. Travel all around the state for a bit of work here, a bit of work there. Is there a way for growers to work better collectively to create an ongoing opportunity? The travel will still be involved, but at least there will be some continuity of work. How can we think about how this work might create opportunities into more highly skilled work in the horticulture sector? Farmers are always telling me that we need more young farmers. How do we grasp those young people who have a real interest and create opportunities for them? The grey nomad market has demonstrated that they're keen to get out and do a bit of work. So, and indeed many grey nomads have taken up the opportunity. But I do want to make the point, government is there to support industry. This is industry's problem to solve. As Ag Minister, I want to work side by side with you, but industry is best placed to determine what it needs to do in order to attract its workforce.
Minister, we've actually had this question from a couple of people, but the journalist who's posed it is Natalie from the Weekly Times. She said the current Victorian Tasmanian quarantine arrangement was for the first 1,500 seasonal workers to arrive. Will you commit to extending this arrangement further once that 1,500 figure is reached?
Well, I look forward to having more to say about this sometime in the future, but I have alluded to the fact that with the federal government offering to growers, I might say, that they are going to double the intake of Pacific Islander workers, we really need them to cooperate with us and collaborate on quarantine.
So you're considering any additional quarantine arrangements for the season?
As I said, I look forward, I hope to have more to say on this shortly.
Rightio.
Or in the future. In the near future.
Okay, we've got a lot of questions coming in on that topic. But I've got one from Andrew at Stock and Land. He would like to know if the government will be providing financial assistance to show committees, I'm assuming that's agricultural shows, given the growing list of cancellations due to the pandemic.
Yes, well, we have provided some assistance already to our show committees for this year, and indeed it was really a great privilege for me to attend the Victorian Agricultural Show Society's get-together in Bendigo not that long ago, and to announce some support. But I do understand it's going to be a really difficult time as agricultural shows across Victoria, show committees need to make decisions about what they will be doing this year. But we have seen some innovation across our show committees, and of course I understand this locally. with shows in Kyneton and Lancefield, Dalesford. So I'm very close to those committees, and they'll be making those difficult decisions. But we have provided support to our regional show committees, and I expect we'll continue to do so.
We've got a question here from Peter. I'm not sure what organisation he's from, but given the Royal Commission findings into Black Saturday and the detrimental role of massive towers, will you support underground cabling for future energy needs?
Look, this is a really complex issue, and I don't know whether Peter has a particular project that he has in mind that he would like to ask me about, which I suspect might be the case, but perhaps you could get some clarity there.
Right. We've got another one from Peter from ABC Gippsland.
Yeah.
Can you provide an update on Victoria's new Animal Welfare Act? Many recommendations from the inquiry into the impact of animal rights activism hinged on this new act. The engagement summary report was released back in April. When will we see the act finalised? So a few questions in that one.
Okay, great question, Peter. Thank you so much. Let's remember that this is a complete rewrite of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, and it is a very complex process. What we are working to do is to ensure that we are taking out those bits of the POCTA Act that do work, but we are shifting the emphasis away from prevention of cruelty, which is sort of a negative frame around animals, to the care and protection of animals. Extensive stakeholder consultation is underway. Good progress is being made on the delivery of this commitment, but it is fair to say it is taking time because of its complexity. When you rewrite an act, you want to make sure you get it right. But we remain committed to delivering this act in this term of government.
We've got sorry.
I might just add to that by saying that the government has undertaken, continues to consult extensively with stakeholders from right across the spectrum. So including, I might say, obviously in agriculture, but including also in fishing and hunting and racing, which are other areas, of course, that have a keen interest on understanding this act. But I do want to say this: I feel very confident that farmers will welcome the introduction of the act. I talked before about the need to make, or the increasing demands that global markets are making to understand the emissions, the emissions that are being generated in the production of agriculture. Similarly, increasingly markets are wanting to understand and know more about animal welfare standards. And in fact, we saw this being played out in the Australian-UK free trade agreement, where British farmers were claiming higher animal welfare standards than us. Now, that's not true, but I raise that point just to say that this will increasingly become one of the issues that markets are interested in. And I want to make sure that we, at the moment, we lag other parts of the world. I want to make sure that we're right up there and competitive on animal welfare standards.
Just a reminder to everybody that this is a recording, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the Rural Press Club Facebook page later today. But also, I just want to remind people that we are welcome to take questions, but please put your name and your organisation attached to it. It really helps us asking. We've got one here from Dr. Nigel Crump at the Australian Seed Potato Industry Certification Authority.
Yes.
Nigel says, COVID has highlighted the awareness of biosecurity to the general public. How is the Vic government capturing this opportunity to improve agricultural-based biosecurity?
Well, biosecurity is always critical to all of our work and central to the role of Agriculture Victoria. I must say, upon becoming Agriculture Minister, within a week I was fully briefed on the responsibilities I had in that role in relation to biosecurity, and my eyes were open to the ever-present threat of diseases and pests on our agriculture industry. Look, we will continue to invest in biosecurity. We have a commitment to a new biosecurity act. We need to make our act as simple and streamlined and as effective as possible. Again, that's a big project, but it is one that we look forward to undertaking. So we cannot, as avian influenza demonstrated to us, we cannot afford not to always be focused on biosecurity. But can I take this opportunity to congratulate all of those that were involved in the avian influenza outbreak, and we're coming up to 12 months since that outbreak, and really the way in which the industry worked cooperatively to really face into and head off this challenge is something that we can learn a lot from.
We've got quite a lot of questions about underground power lines.
But I'm happy to answer. I'm really happy to answer that. I suspect that that these are questions that are coming in relation to the Western Victorian Network Transmission Project.
Yeah, that's correct, yes.
Now, I met last Thursday in Parliament with a group of potato farmers from Mount Prospect, and along with the VFF, and I look forward to continuing to work with the agriculture sector on the potential impact of this project. Certainly, as Minister for Agriculture, I am really keen to understand the direct impact on agriculture of this project, and to do what I can to ensure that we are protecting prime agricultural land. This is a challenge right across our state, I might say, something that we need to, it's a constant juggle. As I talked about earlier, we've got this challenge around needing people to live in our country towns. We need them to deliver essential services, including health and education. So we need homes for them, and those homes need to be powered, and so on. It's a constant juggling exercise, but certainly as Agriculture Minister, I'm very clear about my responsibilities to advocate on behalf of farmers and for farmland. But as I said, I'll continue to work with VFF, who are working also with farmers on the ground on this issue.
We've got congrats, Minister, on the government's commitment to agric. Is the government still committed to the 20 billion agri-export target by 2030? And that's from Alex.
Yes. Growing exports, our produce is, best in class, and we have so much more that we can do to continue to boost it. One of the budget announcements is about our $11.7 million investment in improving traceability systems. So my message to farmers is that we need to utilise these traceability systems, take advantage of ag tech. Consumers want to know where their food is from, and our story is a great story. But these new traceability systems can also give farmers better information about where their markets are, and understanding all the touch points that their produce goes through, understand, where profit is being taken, but also, what is in demand internationally. And I think we're really going to see some great step changes as a consequence of the uptake of traceability across the sector.
We've got a question here from Michael, and it goes back to, I know you mentioned in your talk about accommodation in regional areas. Rural worker accommodation remains a key stumbling block. Can you please ascertain what is happening with the Vic government's completed review of this following vast public input in October last year?
Yes. So there's a couple of couple of things that are happening. Now, is this a question about on-farm accommodation? Is that the...
rural worker accommodation? Perhaps we can address it as on-farm and other options.
Yeah. So the Planning Minister is really acutely aware of the demands of some growers to make it easier to have on-farm accommodation. I've got to say there are real pros and cons attached to this, and this is something that at this workshop that I had with industry, something that was alluded to. I think one of the things that we need to think about is how do we, because we have to look after the welfare of workers. This goes to the reputation of the industry as well. So we need to think about what the benefits might be of more flexible kind of accommodation options in town for agricultural workers, where they can access, people of their own community, have greater access to culturally appropriate food and the like. And we've seen some great examples of this up in Robinvale. In Robinvale, the Victorian government is working to support the migrant workers centre up there to refit an old community health facility to create accommodation for Pacific Island workers. So look, the Minister is looking at ways to make it simpler and easier for farmers to get accommodation on their property, but there are pros and cons, and we need to think a little, as I said, outside the square on this. Portable housing, the tiny house model, there's some, the idea of the backpacker sort of hostel. These are some of the things that we need to consider.
There's one here from ABC Gippsland. Are Agricultural Victoria's vets being told not to visit farms due to COVID?
Look, thank you for that question. I have asked my department to follow up on something I read on Twitter on the weekend. My initial understanding is that that is actually not correct, but I would need to get back to you with the response from the department. But I might say the case that my understanding is that the case that was highlighted on social media on the weekend would not be one that would not where an ag vet would normally attend. That would normally the expectation would be that that would be managed by the farmer's own vet.
Why is that?
Because farmers are responsible for the well-being of their own animals.
All right, no worries. Well, we're getting up to time. If someone has one burning question, please feel free to let us know. The time's ticking down. But look, we are very happy for everybody to attend. Thank you so much. And thank you, Minister. We're sorry this couldn't be in person.
I know.
Hopefully it won't be too long and we'll be able to have some events, whether that be networking events in regions or guest speakers. But I'd like to take this opportunity to plug the press club, the regional rural press club, if that's okay. For those listening, please go to our website, sign up as a member. We do have networking events. We have lots of guest speakers. Our awards are currently being judged. We're supposed to have our awards evening in a couple of weeks, but we'll see how that pans out. But yeah, if you've liked what you've heard, please sign up. There's a lot more to come. But don't think any more pressing questions have come through. So if it's all right, I would like to wrap up for today and thank Minister Mary-Ann Thomas for her time.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you in person as soon as possible. It'd be great to catch up again. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, everybody.